Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here at the beginning to give a good old-fashioned TW. Today we're going to be hearing a really important story. This is my dear friend Ari. She's an incredible woman of God, and part of her story is she went through something pretty difficult. It involves manipulation, power dynamics, and things happening in her life that should not happen in a spiritual/religious context. So if those are topics that you feel like you don't need to digest today and you want to protect your own mental health in that specific way, then I'd love for you to listen to her story up to 24 and a half minutes and stop it there. Next time you'll see a part 2 of her story. We talk about some Bible verses and we talk about some more updated modern day thoughts and theology geek outs of where she is today and what she's been learning and how God's been speaking to her. So part 2, there's no trigger warning on that. But this, today, part 1, go ahead and stop it at 24 and a half minutes if you feel that you want to play it safe with that. Thanks for listening. We are back with another inner healing testimony, and I'm really excited because this is my good friend Ari.
Hello.
And Ari has, even though she's young, been in ministry in different capacities for years and years. And she got baptized in 2019. She has a huge amazing heart for the Lord, and she knows a lot about inner healing. So I'm excited to learn from her. I'm excited for all of y'all to learn from her. Don't worry, we're going to get back into the book of Revelation. It's just that we've hit chapter 4 and 5, and I have to deep dive, and I have to nerd out for a few more weeks before we get back to that. So Ari, tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, well, like she said, I'm Ari. I don't know. I always struggle with this kind of
I
question.
hate that. Where did you grow up?
Okay, I've grown up in California my whole life, in the Inland Empire and Chino, Ontario area.
Nice.
Pretty much my whole life. I've pretty much gone to the same church my whole life, which has been nice. Yeah, and I got, involved in ministry pretty young, just in different serving capacities. My grandma has her had her pastoral credential at one point, and so was doing weddings and stuff here and there. So I kind of saw ministry from a pretty early age, but didn't really make it my own until I was a little bit older. But yeah, I've grown up in California my whole life.
Nice. And you have a sister. Mm-hmm. And what else? You did dual immersion, so you're bilingual.
Yeah, I am bilingual.
Fun.
Yeah, so I went to a K through 8th elementary school. I mean, I didn't actually stay there the whole time. By 8th grade, I was over being with the same group of kids. I was actually homeschooled for a year, which is just random and fun, and I loved it, and I would have done it longer, but everybody collectively decided I probably needed to be social again.
Nice.
So yeah, I am bilingual in both English and Spanish.
Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
I'm for sure an introvert. I can turn on my extroversion when I need to, but I prefer to be, with myself.
Nice. You've been following Jesus for a long time. Tell us how that came about, or maybe some early core memories in your spiritual walk.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was little, we went to this church in Rancho. I don't even remember the name of it. We went for a very brief period of time. My grandma, that was more her home church than anything, but we had some close family friends that were both super involved at the church that I grew up at, and then also just I think at some point worked there too. So that's kind of how I got involved there. And my grandma would go kind of to different of their ministry things, and so I vividly remember we were very kind of Christmas, Easter, holiday Christians for a while, and so I remember getting dressed up to go to church on holidays, and that's my biggest memory of church, honestly, when I was younger. So I didn't really have very much value for being a Christian or going to church very much. When I did go with my grandma to her church in Rancho, I didn't love it, but I always loved when I got to go with my aunt and uncle that went to my church that I grew up at, and
nice.
That I consider my home church. So
which was called IHC at the time.
Yeah, it was IHC at the time. Yeah.
Now Verve City Church.
Yeah.
I was there for a long time as well, and have many, many fond memories, and I'm so glad I got to meet you during that time, and of course we'll be friends for a long time.
Absolutely.
And so you mentioned your grandma. Of course, she was a huge part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to talk about how that looked and how family looked for you growing up?
Yeah. So I had a little bit of an unconventional family, which is not even a little bit, it was very unconventional, which is why I think also just even going back to my faith journey, it was so rocky and difficult for me to figure out what I actually believed in, I don't know, what was actually an actual representation of Christ. And so, yeah, I grew up originally when I was younger with my mom, I think until I was 9 or 10, I want to say. But I mean, from a very young age, it was pretty evident that she had some, like, I think undiagnosed mental health issues even to this day. And then also just like evident substance abuse issues. So she was not like, she was very much not present at all, like pretty much at all. I raised my sister more than anything. And it wasn't until, like I said, until like I was 10, my sister's 3 years younger. So she was like 7 at the time that we ended up moving in with my grandma. Thankfully, like we never actually, I mean, I did grow up as a foster kid, but I never actually had to go into like a foster home necessarily.
Right.
My sister, I believe, ended up being legally adopted just because of the age that she was by the time like everything kind of wrapped up, because we went through years of like court cases and like custody things, and her not really wanting custody, but mainly just wanting custody for like, I don't know, just I feel like just to say that she got it. And so there was just a lot of, you know, back and forth in court cases. So things didn't honestly wrap up until I think I was close to like 17. But at that point, I was pretty checked out of it. Like I didn't really have to be super involved. It was more things that were, you know, going on like with the court system. But at that point, I think when I turned 16 was the age that I could decide if I wanted to like be adopted, if I wanted to like go back with my mom or anything. Like I had that choice. And so at that point I was pretty much like, absolutely not, leave me out of this. So yeah. I kind of got a little bit of freedom from that, I think, towards like 16, 17, which is really like when I think my faith kind of took off, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you kind of raised yourself in some ways.
Oh, for sure.
Your grandma was helpful in some ways. And what would you say as a Christian who didn't have the parental example of Christ? What would you just say to someone who kind of like did, as far as what do people like me need to know about your faith journey and about being in community with you? What would you advise me?
I think to like be gentle with the fact that people who like for like, I know for me personally, and I think from other Christians that I've spoken to that like come from like broken families, it's pretty universal. We really struggle with like the actual trust aspect that comes with being a Christian and having faith in Christ, like, and having faith in all the great things that he comes with, and having a relationship comes with. Like, it's very difficult for our brains to grasp that that's even, I mean, I think for any brain, like anybody is going to struggle with like, oh my gosh, like our God is so great and he really does give so much grace and he allows for just, I mean, so many incredible like miracles to happen. Like that's hard for anybody to grasp, but especially someone who grew up in like, whether it be like an environment that wasn't very stable, where things weren't consistent, where, you know, like, yeah, just any sort of, I think, turbulent environment, that's going to be hard for anybody to grasp. So I know for me, I had a really hard time, and even still I struggle, and that's something that I daily have to work on, the actual trust aspect that comes with like trusting God with your life and trusting God with like your journey and your story, and having patience with people who like me who struggle with that, because I think it does become a little bit difficult in like just in for somebody who's like, even I have like a mentor that kind of just walks with me in my faith journey, and I know she's annoyed with me all the time. She's great, she loves me, she's happy to do it, but I know she's like, oh my gosh, like we are going back and forth and back and forth, and it is a lot of back and forth. So I think just for someone like me to be comfortable with that back and forth, like it's just a part of the journey, and eventually you do get to, I believe that you eventually do get to a place where you're like, oh, this makes sense, like this is what it was supposed to be the whole time. But yeah, I think also just for somebody on the outside looking in, to just kind of like have patience with somebody, have a little bit of grace for the back and forth that might come with their faith.
And wait on God's timing. I mean, it's probably so different. Me as a young toddler being imprinted that when I walked up to my dad or mom, most of the time they would smile and pick me up and some sort of positive response. Mm-hmm. I mean, were they perfect humans? No, but like those are my core memories at a young age, is that I had a fair amount of trust with the adults in my life. Yeah. And to walk into a faith journey with Jesus, who designed the world to be like in family units, like humanity is actually supposed to like care for each other in that way. Yeah. As a reflection of the Trinity. And when that's absent, how different is that? You know, I can imagine how different that journey is, and how the Lord has to kind of reteach how relationship works.
Yeah, because I even think like, even to your point about like your question about community, like the community aspect of it, like I have found like so many of the most life-giving friendships in my small groups over the years. Like I'm a hardcore like believer in small groups. I think you need small group. I think you need community. But I struggled being actually vulnerable and authentic until like, even now I'm struggling with it, you know, like there are times that I'll go to small group that I will sit in there and I won't say a word, and I won't like, I mean, and everybody in the room can look at me and tell that I don't hide it very well when I'm going through things, you know, like my face tells everything. So they know that I'm going through something, but they also like respect just the way that I am enough to just kind of allow me to be, and at least just like be in their presence, which I just like so appreciate. But the authenticity piece is really difficult. I mean, again, for anybody, but also for somebody who like wasn't like me, who like didn't have those like regular affirmations in their childhood or positive, you know, reinforcements in their childhood, like most, like, you know, or like a lot of people do. So it becomes hard to trust people, I think, in the way that Christians should trust each other in community and should be in community. Thankfully, I think that piece of it I've like definitely grown in and learned in, because I just, again, I adore my small groups. I think they're so great. And I do see so much value in them, but like they only really truly work if like you're willing to actually like be vulnerable and like, you know, bare your soul, honestly. Like that's what a small group was supposed to be if you have a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
If all the boxes are checked, they're safe people,
exactly,
they're mature Christians, etc.
All the things.
Yes. Yeah, which is hard to find. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like post-COVID, like everyone's social skills have taken a step back.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's even harder now.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, how do I hold a conversation? Exactly. I don't know. I've been reflecting in my life as a leader, and I know that I don't work at a church at the moment, but just like leading worship in all these different ministry contexts and being entrusted with different aspects of helping teams in different ways, and even just presuming to make this podcast about Bible stuff, like anything that puts me into any sort of influence on any level, I know that there's a responsibility with that, and just having that like natural leader personality that people look to in different situations sometimes. How do I humbly steward this well? And part of that being, when the people around me have abuse backgrounds, part of abuse is manipulation and control. And part of the kingdom of God is going to be the opposite of that, in order to like heal and rebuild real trust. And so as a leader, my personality can really switch into manipulation and control in subtle ways. And I'm terrified of that, because I don't want to reinforce those things or use any position of influence to persuade someone before they're ready to do anything spiritual, or to give, or to serve, or to like, I feel like there's sometimes when you work at a church or you're part of ministry, there's vision, but when you're putting vision in front of like personal shepherd and care, that becomes institution creep. It's a term I love from one of my favorite books. It's called A Church Called Tove. I highly recommend it. You should read it. But institution creep is like where you get so focused and institutionally minded on advancing these certain goals or whatever, that you're like not shepherding and caring in as intentional or robust of ways. So even just those little things of like, as a worship leader, how do I make sure I never say or do anything that's manipulative? I want to say, if you're ready, raise your hands or stand or whatever. I never want to be that person that's like, everybody do this now.
Yeah,
like I've seen that go badly so many times. And I want to be the opposite of manipulative, because when I look at Jesus Christ, he is patient with people. He understands what they need and where they're coming from, and that the timing is not always going to be instant for their growth, and he never asks us to do anything out of self-serving reasons for himself. He actually leads by teaching us what's best for us.
Right, yeah.
Like he lays down his life for the sheep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think the like not wanting to be manipulative piece of it is so important too. I think it's always the intention behind it, because I know, like, I mean, not everybody, but I honestly truly believe that people with abuse backgrounds, most of us have this incredible ability to walk into a room and feel what is happening, because we're so hyper aware, because that's how we had to grow up. And so I know when I walk into a room, aside just from, I'm sure, the spiritual gifts that just the Lord has blessed me with, like, I can feel the intention behind somebody on a stage. Like, I've walked into services before and felt like it just didn't feel Christ-centered. And I've also walked into services before and immediately felt like, oh, like Jesus is in this room. Like he's going to do incredible things. And it's never ever been about the set or the music or the lighting or anything. It's always about the person and the intention behind either what they say or just their presence on the stage. And so I think it really is like, it just goes back to like having good intention and that being like your heart behind it.
Yeah, is enough of that person's heart yielded and mature enough to create space and make room for the Holy Spirit to operate and to heal and to work and to minister to hearts? Or have they gotten so entrenched in like the hardships of ministry or workaholism or some cover up that they're involved in or some crazy personality issue they have or just immaturity, literally just immaturity, like emotionally, that they're squelching the Holy Spirit, like they're, what's the word? Quenching the Spirit. Because we have to obey Christ, meaning be like him.
Yeah.
Enough to that's how we invite the Holy Spirit to work. We become yielded to his ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his ways aren't controlling, forceful, sneaky, two-faced, or manipulative. And so it's like, how do I make sure
that's always your heart posture?
Yeah, like, man, I'm like begging God. I'm like, I've seen a lot of stories of the damage done. How can I make sure I don't add to that? Like doctors, like first do no harm.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So what are your spiritual gifts?
I think that I do feel that God has blessed me with a gift of speaking and communicating with people. I know that I'm good at that when I like actually allow him to work and do that in me. I also do I get like so nervous about this one because I'm like, I don't know, I haven't like actually practiced it enough, but or even just allowed him to work in me in that enough. But just I also feel like the spirit of prophecy. I have like crazy dreams and I'm like, oh, that was Holy Spirit, and I see the way that it plays out and works out. And obviously sometimes it is just him letting me know, like, you're going to be okay. Or this is, it's never anything crazy, but I have felt the most connected to him through that. I have like the most vivid dreams, I think, ever, like actually on a regular basis. And a lot of times it really is just him affirming literally just affirming who he is, like his goodness. So I would say those two are my two biggest. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think teaching gift, teaching communication, expository preaching, specifically, and then prophecy and then discernment.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Which we have in common, and we've had very weird conversations about weird things that we sense or see or know in the spirit realm, and not everyone would be tracking with those conversations, but we're like, no, I get what you're saying. No, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's fun. So can you give, if you want, an example of like a prophetic dream that you've had?
Yeah, I've had recently, actually. Okay, it was more about like a year ago. I say recently, and it was like a year ago.
That's recent.
I had actually just left I was transitioning off staff at my position at Verve City at the time, and I was like really going through it at this time. So honestly, like for me to even have felt the Holy Spirit in this moment was like a really, really cool experience, because I've struggled like this past year more than any time. I've like struggled with, just wrestling with like what my true beliefs in Christ are, and like how I'm going to display those in my life and what that looks like and how I do that, like moving forward in a healthy and good way. And so at the time I had a dream. I was just so overwhelmed. It was like my first time ever moving away from something that I was like so comfortable with, and really ever a long time. And again, like people with abuse backgrounds really function on consistency. Like we really need consistency. Change is good sometimes, but like, the consistency is what we thrive off of. So I was really shaken up, and I had just like this dream of literally I was just like walking, like taking a hike, and I was outside, and it was like just super sunny outside, super green outside. It was stunning. Like it was just like the most picturesque, like outdoorsy vibe that you can think of. And in this dream, it felt like, I remember like the trees were like extra, they were just doing their thing that day. They were just dancing. I felt like they were dancing. It was stunning. And I remember hearing a voice say, "This is your safe space." And at the time I, again, had just transitioned out of something that was super comfortable for me, and I needed to find something new that like gave me some like life giving. I needed something consistent. I needed something like that. And so I started getting outside a lot more, which like like you're going to find God in nature anytime, but it was so prominent that I made it a point to make sure that I got up and planned a hike or got outside and did something. And I went to this trail called Eucalyptus Loop in Chino Hills. It's so pretty, but there's like a bench up on the top of the like hike kind of that you can sit out and like just kind of look over the city, and it's extra stunning at sunset. And I had just happened to like do it that day. I think I was having a really hard day and just like God was like, this, like, you need to go do this hike. And so I went and I did the hike and I sat up on the bench towards the end, and it was just like there were a couple other people up there that were also watching it, and I just felt like, oh, you can feel community anywhere. Like, and that was what I was searching for, really, because I was trying to figure out, like, was I going to stay at the church at this time? Was I moving to a different church? Like, I really wasn't sure. And so I felt like, oh, you can feel community anywhere. And that was one of the aspects. I felt so surrounded by the trees in my dream. I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And then I'm looking out and the sun is setting and it's just stunning. And I felt, for the first time in probably months, because again, I was going through a big life change. For the first time in probably months, I felt the peace that I had felt in that dream. And it was like, oh, okay, that was God, like, affirming that this is going to be your outlet right now. And ever since then, I've made it a point to be I was outdoorsy before, but I've been very, very intentional.
You leveled it up?
Yeah,
that's
leveled
good.
it up is
That's
crazy.
good. No,
yeah.
he's been telling me that too. Like, I've been learning how people with ADHD, which I hope you don't mind me saying we both have, it's really good for them to like move their body. So like if you're able to walk, to go outside and take a walk, because your brain can like process and calm down and connect with the rest of you. And he's just been like now that my foot works again, especially, I'm like so grateful that I can go on walks, and it's more spiritual than you might think. Absolutely. You know, it's like he's definitely leading me in that direction too. I love how he invites us. Like, a lot of times it's not like a heavy-handed command. It's like we want to follow him. Yeah. And he'll throw out these like beautiful invitations. Like that dream just seems like such a beautiful like clarity of like, okay, this is doable and I can actually go take walks and
that's what I needed something doable, and everything felt so big. Like I was at the time, and I read through the book of Job, which I'm obsessed with at this point. Like it's one of my favorite books ever. But I always just think about like how he was sitting in the garden. All of his friends are kind of sitting around him, kind of not being super helpful, to be honest, like at all. They just weren't being helpful. And maybe they went into it with decent intentions, but they just had no grid. Exactly.
No training, no grid.
Exactly. And I am really blessed to have really great community and like people around me, but when I go through things, I tend to self-isolate, but then B, like sometimes you really do just need to listen to your own inner voice and not listen to like all the other voices around you. And I really have needed to practice that and like and get good at that in this past year. But I just had so many people that I felt like were giving me like suggestions and advice at this time of just like ways to kind of like get out of a funk that like were very helpful. Don't get me wrong. They were absolutely helpful, valid things, but they just felt so big. They felt so big, like, and I couldn't, and that was like my prayer at the time was like, God, just give me something small that I can do that like makes me feel like I have a next step. Yeah. And like he gave me like just that. And I mean, I don't even know when I prayed that prayer, but I know not long after I had that dream. And so, yeah.
You know when it's a God dream.
Yeah.
I know that's like confusing if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know if you've ever had one, but like you will begin, as you continue to commune with God, you will begin to be able to tell if a dream you have is spiritually significant or not. Like it will happen. Yeah.
And one way that I've like even just recognized, like, cause sometimes I'll have like what I feel like is a God dream and I'm like, was that really? Like, I don't know. But what I've realized is I have like the worst memory ever. I'm sure that's I think that's the ADHD.
Yeah. Once again.
Literally. And so, but like most of my dreams I don't remember. And so I usually know I can like, if I can recall it in detail in all the in all its essence, I'm like, okay, that was
it's like it's implanted in my spirit. It's not implanted in my memory, it's implanted in my spirit. And my memory is just explaining it.
Yes.
I have dreams I can remember from years ago. Yeah. And that's like, oh, that was for sure God.
Yeah. Like there's no way I would have remembered that.
No. So I wonder if in this conversation we can talk about, we've planned on talking about something that happened in your life that was a trauma that you're currently healing from. Mm-hmm. And my prayer is that people who are also walking through that same type of recovery and restoration can find their voice in your story and find community in your story. And then maybe you can talk about some of your amazing revelation from the book of Job, because I think that the fact that you've been walking through this healing journey and that the Lord highlighted that book of the Old Testament to you at this specific time in your life, I think that's significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, so you have free reign. Please share whatever you want to share and tell us kind of what happened and what has... First, what were some of the elements that made it so difficult? And then what has helped you take steps forward in healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I don't even know, like, I'm always like, where do I even start with this? So there was this at our church at the time, and he was very, very involved. I mean, for as long as I'd been there, always very involved, mainly in students, like events, and always I know he was very involved in the young adults ministry as well. And I wasn't super familiar with him for, I mean, again, I grew up kind of going off and on, but I was there consistent enough to see familiar faces. And so I knew of him, like I always saw him from afar, but like we didn't really develop like a close relationship until probably like when I was in high school. But we also used to do like baptisms and stuff in like other people's backyards. Like we would like host it in like other people's backyards instead of on campus. And so I remember, like, this is just to kind of paint like a picture of like how long I've known him. Like I remember, like, even though I didn't know his name, I was familiar with him. He was always around. He was just always around.
Yeah, he was.
Always around. So I just assumed it was like, oh, their families are close, which that was actually the case a lot of the time, was that he was close. He was very close with a lot of these girls' families. But I always like kind of stayed in the background because I felt like, oh, like he knows their families. Like that's why they're close. Like that was what I thought for a while. And then eventually this is like my first like memory that I have of like, I don't know, just like actually getting closer to him. Or, I mean, prior to this, like my friends would always go up to him after service or before service or whatever. And I would start kind of like approaching too. And so then he became familiar with me and my name. And I remember one time, like it was either before service or after service. And I don't even remember because we had like so many services in a day at that time. Like, but
yeah, we did.
Literally. But it was before or after service. And I was like standing in the lobby and all of my friends had gone over and like said hi to him. And I feel like I must have been volunteering at this point because I remember like being there for a while. Like I wasn't like going anywhere. So I must have like been volunteering at this point. And I like walked out to the lobby and he's out there. And at this point, like we're pretty like familiar with each other and he knows my name and I know his name and we kind of like make jokes with each other, but it's never been like, it was never anything crazy. But I walked over and I said hi and I noticed that he was made a comment like, oh, you like, and he was like, oh yeah, like it's actually sitting outside. Did you want to go outside and see it? And it was just like right outside the church door. So I was like, for sure. Absolutely. I kind of head back inside and he like starts making more conversation. He's like, well, how do you know so much about anyway? And I was like, oh, like we have like a family friend or he said like, how do you know so much about anyway? Like, does your dad or something like that? Like he made a comment about like does my dad know? I was like, oh no, like I don't really talk to my dad, but we have a family friend that, and so I thought it was cool. And so like that was kind of that, didn't think anything.
And what did he say when?
Yeah, he was like, oh, a girl with daddy issues, and like kind of like laughed. And I was like, oh, okay.
By the way, guys, Ari and I both have this thing where sometimes we laugh when we're kind of pissed. So if we're laughing, it's because it's so ridiculous and we're kind of pissed inside. So yes, a little bit, okay, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
You're fine. Thank you, because I would have forgotten that part. Yeah, at the time, honestly, I didn't think anything of it, which is insane to think about like now, like, several years later. It's crazy to think that I didn't think anything of that comment, but it wasn't until just within this past year that I even thought about that moment and that conversation and how significant it was, because he like totally was scoping out to see what my family did. And again, I didn't like realize that until very recently. That memory just kind of kept coming to me, and then that was something I processed just like within therapy and things like that. Yeah, so that was like my first significant that I can recall time that like we spoke, had like a one-on-one, like that was like our, that I can recall. Okay. But then from there, like kind of to fast forward a little bit, then kind of towards the end of, we used to do this summer camp called Houseboats. It was a lot of fun, but it was very hot. It was very, very hot.
I was on Lake
Mead, I think.
Mead.
Yeah, it was, insane. But we used to do houseboats for like a week, I think. It was like a week. And we were going this year and we were doing a sale to try to like raise funds for anybody that just like couldn't afford to like, pay to go to camp. It was like super early in the morning and I posted like, on Instagram that there was sale, and I had like everybody and their mother from church on my Instagram, and so they and happened to follow me too, and so he saw that we were having a sale and like commented on it and was like, oh, I would love to show up, but I don't know if like I don't know if I should. He said something like that. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I had like oblivious. Like I had no clue. And so I was like, oh, like it's open to everybody. You should totally come by. Like, you know, I'm sure everybody would love to see you again. Once I like get to like, I had no clue anything that was going on. I was like, you should totally come by. And so he says he's going to come by, and I, you know, just like whatever, put my phone away, and I went back and I told everybody, and I was like, you know, going to come by and check out the sale. And one of the moms that was there was like, oh, so-and-so's dad isn't going to like that. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's weird. You know, again, teenager, like whatever, moving on. And so I thought that was weird. And then I don't know if like I questioned it or if my friend that was with me questioned it. I want to say my friend might've questioned it. Like, oh, like, why won't they like that? And then like this mom just kind of said like, oh, there's just some stuff going on right now. And he was asked to step down. And so he's no longer like at. And I remember like hearing that and like it kind of clicking in my brain, like, oh, that's weird. He would say that like he wasn't really like he shouldn't come. And then I also like remembered, oh, I haven't seen him in quite a few weeks. So anyway, I'd already invited him. They weren't going to tell him he couldn't come. It was a public sale. And they also weren't elaborating on anything else. Like also probably because we were teenagers. So like makes sense. But like
however, I would push back on that approach a little bit now knowing everything that I know. Like,
absolutely.
What if they would have just been like, hey, y'all.
Absolutely.
That could have been helpful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because this day is also another significant one because he ended up coming. And I vividly remember one of the first things he said when he got there was, I just want you guys to know I didn't do anything illegal. I was like, I thought that was strange even then. But I was like, okay, like weird that that's how you intro it, but whatever. So he goes into explaining kind of a situation that like, I feel like I maybe probably shouldn't explain that one just because it's like not my thing.
It involves other individuals.
Yeah.
But then you heard his version of it anyway,
yeah,
which was not accurate.
Yeah,
so.
I heard his version of what had happened to cause him to like leave, to have to step down from the church. And at the time, because I hadn't heard anything from the other party at all, I was like, oh, okay. That's weird. That kind of sucks. And truthfully, like I was going through my own church hurt with the church at the time too, which didn't make this any better.
Yes.
I was going through my own church at the time, church hurt at the time. So it kind of played into that. And so I heard his story and I'm like, well, I'm also kind of going through this thing right now at the church. And I'm kind of sounds accurate how they would respond to a thing.
Another side note, this is the old people at the church.
Yes,
they're not there anymore.
Not the current people.
Go.
All the current people are great.
I'm like,
disclaimer.
We should probably clarify that too.
Yeah, old people no longer there.
The church has changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I truthfully, I fell for it. I was like, oh my gosh, that really sucks. Like you're really going through a lot. Like, you know, like, and so the entire time he's there, because he stayed for a long time, he didn't buy anything that I can recall, but he like sat there and he talked for pretty much the entire time that we had. And
do you now think that the sole reason he showed up was to give his side of the story?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. 100%, because that's the first thing he did. We hadn't even said hello.
Yeah.
So after he left, I'd gone home and like me and my friend had kind of like talked about it a little bit. And like, it's my like I don't know if it's the people pleaser in me, the empath in me. I don't know. I was like, I feel so bad for him. Like I can't imagine like leaving, like having been at a church for so long and now not having it. Cause that's how he was painting it. He said, like, he literally said, he was like, my small group has cut me off. Everybody that I know, like nobody's talking to me anymore. I don't have anybody. I felt so bad. So I went home, I don't know if it was that night or the next day, and I like had sent him a message and was just like, oh, you know, thanks so much for coming to the yard sale. Like, I'm really sorry about everything that's happening. Because I was like, this is like really, you know, this really sucks. And unfortunately that like really kind of triggered that was like the catalyst for like regular text messages between him and I.
I mean,
definitely would have found another catalyst for sure. But yeah, that was kind of when the regular texting started.
How old were you when the regular texting started?
I want to say I was 17. I was 17, yeah. Because I turned 18 like towards the end of all this. But I was 17 and I remember I had gone to like during this time frame, I'm going to say like between June, I think we went to summer camp like late June of that year and like July 4th. Okay. So during that time frame, like he wasn't texting me a ton, but like he would definitely like slide up on like bikini, like pictures of me and my friends in bikinis at the beach. And at the time, again, weird now, I didn't think anything of it because he did that with everybody. He did that with every teenage girl that I knew. And so it just didn't, so never thought anything of it. I remember I posted another like bikini, like it was summertime. We were at the beach all the time. I was in bikinis. And so I had posted another one and I think I maybe just posted a picture of the beach and he said something like, oh, super lame of you, like not to invite me. And that's kind of like when it got more into like like more personal things. And he would just randomly text me and tell me how lonely he was, how sad he was about everything that was going on. Just like, I mean, the entire sob story. And then, yeah, so then so during that time frame, he would just kind of slide up, say weird things, but it was, again, nothing crazy. Looking back, absolutely crazy. But at the time in my head, I was like, okay, just, he's lonely. He needs a friend. And I was like, I can be your friend.
He was really good at acting a little dumber than he actually is.
It was just, yeah. So then by 4th of July of this year, that's kind of like when it got like real weird. I was getting like pretty regular messages from him at this point on both Instagram and Snapchat. And like they were mainly just about how lonely he was, the things that he's like, you know, like experienced to like not be lonely and just things like that. Like I was getting a lot about this guy's life and I was like not asking for any of it. And so 4th of July, there's a firework parade and I was there and I'd posted like a video. I was like with my family too. And I'd posted a video of the fireworks and he was like, oh my gosh, I'm here too. Would love to say hi. And again, at this point, it wasn't like, I don't know. I was like, okay, you want to say hi? We're in a public place or at the park, whatever. We haven't seen each other in a while. And so I was like, yeah, if I have the time, I'll, you know, let you know. And then we can like find a place to meet up. But then throughout the night, like I was also like, I was with family. I just wasn't on my phone. I wasn't really concerned with like going up and meeting up with, it just wasn't on my brain. But I was getting regular text messages from him throughout the night asking, are you ready to meet up? Like, do you want to meet up now? Like, when did you want to meet up? And so eventually I just like stopped responding. I just didn't even open the messages and I waited until we left the park and I texted him and was like, hey, so sorry, like we ended up leaving, but like I hope you had a fun night. And then the next message he sent was, oh, well, you could always come over. At this point it was like 11:30 at night. So that is like a bizarre, like, and like with a winky face. And I just kind of like, I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. I just left it open and kind of closed it. And I think he could tell immediately that like, he'd kind of messed up. And so he texted back almost right away and was like, ha ha ha, JK, like, you know, trying to play it off. So I thought that was weird. And at that point, then it was kind of like clicking in my brain, like, okay, he's probably not just like being friendly. But I mean, unfortunately from there, like the timeline kind of gets blurry after this because it did progress really quickly. But like he started like, again, like I said, I had him on Snapchat and Instagram. There was a point when I was in high school, I think at this point, I was still 17. It must have been like August. I feel like it was like August because like it was, is that when football happens?
I don't know.
Yeah. I was at a football game in high school.
Okay.
And I was in the stands and unfortunately my high school the high school that I went to has a not great history with teachers being appropriate. And there was a very publicized case going on at the time at our high school. And, you know, unfortunately, high school students don't always take these things seriously as they should. And so I was with a few friends, and my friend had gotten on Tinder, and she was not 18 at the time, but she had put that she was 18. She was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I put my age up to like 50, if I can find some of the teachers on here, knowing that if it shows, you know, if they're matching, then I can, you know.
Okay.
So she's like scrolling through, and this is also a friend that I'd taken to church with me before, so she has also seen before, so she knows him. Well, not knows him, but has seen him before. And so she's scrolling and, you know, whatever, and then she eventually gets to like a picture and it has his age, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, he is definitely on this app. And so then unfortunately I was curious, and so I went and I downloaded it, and I was like, I wonder if it would if I would find him. And so I downloaded it and I go through, and almost immediately I match, or didn't even match with him. I saw him, I saw his picture, and I was like, I like panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I found him. And so, you know, like we're like a couple of teenage girls like passing the phone like, back and forth, like freaking out. And so in the process of like passing the phone back and forth, like, oh my gosh, we both found him. We had accidentally swiped like in the direction of like, I don't really remember. It's like whatever direction is like, yes, I like you. And so we'd accidentally swiped on it, and immediately it said like it was like a super match, which like I think is like,
so he'd already swiped on you.
Yeah. And
which you just got it. So
I had literally just downloaded it. I did not have it on my phone for more than 20 minutes by the time I found him. And so we immediately matched, and I like closed out the app immediately because I was like, oh shoot, that's not what I wanted to happen. And also, why did he just match with me? Because then it's all clicking in my brain. I don't know if I think I said I texted him. I think I texted him. I want to say that I texted him almost immediately because I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't. No, he sent me a winky face on the app because you can like respond. Like when you like match with somebody, you can like respond with like a thing. So he sent me a winky face on the app. So then I texted him and I was like, oh my gosh, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm at a football game. We were messing around. Like I totally explained myself. I was like, I didn't even realize that I didn't mean to match with you. And he texted back and said, ha ha ha, I super like you too, with like a winky face. And like basically just confirming like this was not an accident. And so from there, I, deleted the app immediately because again, we just had downloaded it for, giggles, which did not turn to giggles. But he had been weird with me before. And so then that just kind of added, it did not help. And so then he kind of would start just texting me only on Snapchat. Like he strayed away from Instagram and text message. Like he would only text me on Snapchat, which I noticed a shift, but had also transitioned to mainly texting me like super late evenings, early mornings, which I noticed. And I don't even remember how.
Does this weirdo also never sleep? Like,
yeah,
that's
seriously.
weird. Okay.
But it had kind of, I remember when it really got weird and I felt at this point, I knew what was happening was not right. But I was like, I am so deep in, and also like everybody loves him. I think that's what was so hard for me at the time was I was like, even if I did tell somebody, like everybody loves him. Like nobody is going to believe anything I say.
Yeah, it's intimidating with that social capital.
Yeah. And he has friends everywhere. And so I remember knowing that what was starting to happen was wrong, but feeling like, okay, who am I going to tell that's actually going to believe anything? So I want to say I was prepping I was going to some sort of like concert or something. I want to say, I feel like that's what was happening because no, I had just bought tickets for Stagecoach, which I never ended up going to because that was like, I had bought them like a year earlier and then COVID happened the following year. So I never even got to go, but I was shopping for Stagecoach because I just bought tickets. And I think I'd posted something on like Instagram. I was standing like, I think I'd posted something like, oh, like going Stagecoach shopping or like going to the beach or whatever. And he had commented on it and was like, oh, super fun. What beach are you going to? Like, was just kind of making conversation. And then he said, I don't even know how we segued into the conversation, but he said Stagecoach is really expensive. Like, how are you affording that? And then I don't know. We talked about like how I was affording to go to Stagecoach. And then he was like, I think it would be really nice. He was like, I'll send you some money to go buy like clothes and stuff for the festival as long as you send me pictures of like what you buy. And like, and like it was very clear about as long as you send me pictures about what you buy, like while you're wearing them. And I was like, I mean, that's a little bit like, you don't really have to send me money. Like, that's totally fine. Like I have, I think, I don't know if I was working at the time, but I feel like I had like an allowance or something. So I was like, oh no, like I'm okay. And he was adamant. He was like, oh no, like it's totally fine. Like I he was like, I just want to be generous in this way. Like I have a lot of extra money to spare, like let me send you like $50 or something and you can like buy stuff. And, and so I was like, I mean, okay, if you're going to so he ended up sending me like $50. And I want to say he did that probably 2 or 3 other times. Like it was never always $50. It was like $20 here. Like, but it was like 2 or 3 other times that I know for a fact that he sent me money specifically only if I purchased clothes and then like sent him pictures of me. And one of the times he was like very specific. This was after he had gotten real gross, which I'll get into in a second. But at one point it was also like, and this is when I want to say this was right around the time that I was like, okay, like you can't, like, please don't send me anymore. Like, this is not okay. He was like, oh, I'll send you money if you go and like buy like something really like dainty and cute to wear as long as you send me a picture of you in it. And like was just very specific about like the kind of clothing that he wanted me wearing. So then at that point I was like, okay, please don't send me any more money. Like, I'm okay. Like, thanks so much. Then from there, I don't even know like how or when, to be honest. Like, I'm pretty sure it was literally he just sent it, but he sent me a picture of him like fully not wearing clothing and on Snapchat with like I want to say it was like with no preface, like there was no conversation beforehand, because I remember like he was very notorious for sending pictures and videos on Snapchat instead of just typing. Like he would always like send a picture of himself and then like a caption with like what he wanted to say. So I'm thinking I'm just like getting another picture of like him talking about how lonely he is or like whatever his days, consist of. So I like click on it and it was very much not just that. So he sent me that and I don't think I even said anything. I think I just opened it and was like, oh, whoa, crazy. This is getting out of hand. Like,
and this was your senior year of high school?
Yeah, this was my senior year of high school. And so I like closed out the app, and then he texted me I don't even remember I just remember he kept texting me like it was normal. Like from there, like he sent me that picture, I didn't respond, and then the next day he just like continued texting me like everything was fine, like that did never happen.
Do you think that your trauma background kicked you into a freeze response?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because I know, like looking back, there were so many things like I could have blocked him probably in that moment, but I think I was so like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I don't even know what to do. Like I was so just stuck in, this was not what I expected, and I don't even know how to like process or register or like function.
And do you remember your age? Were you still 17?
I was still 17, yeah.
Okay.
So then after that, I didn't block him right away, so he continued to send pictures and eventually videos at some point. So then at some point, like he started telling me just about like things that he's done with other people, and it was escalating like very quickly.
So he's divulging his sexual history to you.
Yeah.
At least partially.
And so then at some point I like really recognized how just out of hand it was, but I also, again, didn't feel like I could tell anybody. So I didn't, but I started definitely like just not responding to messages as much, not like, or at all really. And then eventually he sent me a message and was like, hey, I just really feel like we should talk and like have a conversation, also on Snapchat. I really feel like we should have a conversation, but I really think that we should like do it in person. Like, I just really think we need to have an in-person conversation. Like, I just don't, I just remember him saying he wanted to have I don't even remember about what. So I told him, at first I was like, oh no, like I feel like we, I don't mind like calling or texting or whatever, but like I don't feel like we need to meet in person. But he was insistent on meeting in person. So I was like, okay, like I have some time this afternoon, and he was like, because at first he said he could pick me up. And I was like, no, I don't really want you to like know where I live, which I didn't say, but I, at that point didn't want him to know where I lived. And so I was like, there's like a house in my neighborhood that's like not on my street, but it's like a few blocks up the way that like totally you wouldn't know where I lived if you met me. And so I was like, okay, like if we're meeting, like, I can meet, but like I can only meet for like, I think I said like 20 minutes. And I think I lied to him and said like, my grandma's going to be home soon, so I need to make sure I get back. She was like, okay, totally fine, I'll meet you there. And so I like walk over and we meet. And at this point, I want to say at this point I was 18. This like when the actual like physical like thing happened. We were like, I had gotten in the car and like we were, he was just like, I haven't talked to you in a while, just wanted to make sure that things between us were okay. I got in his car because I like walked at that point. I was like really late to the driving game. I did not want to drive for a long time, so I just walked up the street from my house like to this, like just like got in his car. And so then I was like sitting in the passenger seat, he's in the driver's seat, and he's like, I just feel like we really need to have a conversation. We haven't talked in a while. I wanted to make sure things weren't weird. Was just kind of like explaining himself and then just again started going into how lonely he was. Like that was like that's what I remember the most about it, is he just always talked about how, like, because I think he knew that like I felt the most bad about that part of it, like the loneliness part. And so I honestly don't even remember how exactly it progressed, but I remember him just like talking, having casual conversation, and him saying like, and I was like, I really have to kind of get going soon. Like what was it exactly that was so important that you wanted to talk in person? And then he like grabbed my hand, put it on his like I don't know, like leg area, crotch area, and then basically like had me like do things to him in the passenger seat, or while I was in the passenger seat and he was in the driver's seat. And then I was like, okay, I really gotta go. Like I can't. At that point, I was really stressed out, and so
you were able to finally get yourself out of the car.
Yeah. So I was like, I think I don't even remember what I said. I think I just said something like, okay, like I really have to go, and then I just kind of like walked home, and I remember he like just drove off super fast, and then from there, I blocked him. Yeah, I try to give myself grace.
I know. I hear you. Yeah. I hear you like being like the hindsight has frustration in it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that happened, and then I didn't tell anybody for like maybe a year. I feel like I waited like a year. Because this happened like at the beginning of because I had just turned 18 when this happened. So I turned 18 so it would have been like mid senior year, late senior year, maybe at this point. And then I finally had gotten the courage to like tell my small group leader. But I went through this process of like in telling my story like to people, where I very much started off by telling like the most minor details of it. Like I'd be like, he sent me some weird text messages, like leave every other like actually important like.
And maybe you were subconsciously kind of looking for their reaction.
Yeah.
Are they safe to tell this to?
Right, exactly. So I think at that point I had just told my small group leader, like, he sent me some really weird messages, and I remember her kind of responding like, well, yeah, he's, and like her knowing. And I was like, no, like they were like not like, and so it ended up, I remember I had started the conversation over text because I was so like overwhelmed. I don't even remember what like triggered me to finally want to say something, but I started the conversation over text and she didn't super take it very seriously, which I don't blame her for. Like I was very like vague in what I was saying. It could have been anything, like, so she didn't really say, so it took me a while to actually get her to coffee to actually be able to sit down and have this conversation. I want to say it took probably 2 or 3 weeks after even that initial text. So then when I actually finally sat down and had coffee with her and actually explained what happened, again, at this point I didn't tell everything that happened. I want to say that I was like, yeah, would send me like weird text messages and it just made me uncomfortable. And I don't even think I had like said anything about the like pictures that I'd gotten, or like certainly not the money. I don't think I ever said anything about that, or like definitely not like the actual physical. Like I think I literally just said like he sent me weird text messages. So then she ended up going and telling like someone on staff at the time and said that they were going to be taking care of it and that they were hoping to take care of it. Oh, I think what triggered me to want to, I think I remember now. I wanted to say something because I had seen an Instagram post of him working at it or like volunteering at another church local in the area. And that really frustrated me. And I was like, there's no reason he should be working at a church. And so then I had finally like said something. And at the time I actually knew the pastor that was volunteering with at the time. I was familiar with who he was working with, and so I was like, I feel like this person should probably know know all what was happening, because there were also, at this point I was becoming aware of things that happened beyond me. And so I had told, my small group leader was like, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, I'll let someone on staff know and they'll kind of take care of it. To my knowledge, I was told that it was taken care of, that I didn't have anything to worry about, that that the pastor that working with at the time probably wasn't going to do anything about it, but like that they'd been notified, they were aware, that kind of thing. Then about probably 6 months to a year later, I decided I wanted to share more. And at this point I was no longer a student, so I shared it directly with the same staff member that like my small group leader had shared it with. And so I then went and told her like a lot more of what was actually went on. Again, I don't think at that point I said anything about the money or the actual physical thing, but I did share the photos and like that kind of thing. And like I even shared screenshots. I shared everything. And at that point I was taken a lot more seriously, and I was told like, this is absolutely not okay. We'll see what we can do, kind of take care of it. And then I was told kind of from there, like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's all set. We're taking care of it. We reported it. You're all good. So I just kind of like moved on with my life. Like didn't think about it, but I was like, okay, I reported it. I did my part, like whatever. Then probably like 2 years ago now, I was working at, Inland Hills at the time. And I don't even remember how, I feel like it was like a Holy Spirit thing. I was walking by my boss's office at the time, and I was just really overwhelmed, and I walked into their office and I closed the door and I was like, what do I have to do if I want to make a police report about like something that happened like years ago? And so at this point they were super great, sat down, heard me out.
Yeah, and this individual had a bit more training in their background.
Yeah.
For handling.
Yeah. So they were, incredible. And so that day nothing really came of it. They were just like, let me hear your story. And then they were like, assuming you reported it the way that, like, the way that you said that you did, like, I should be able to find something maybe in past emails, whatever. And so they ended up going through.
Oh, in HR records.
Yeah, in HR records, right. So I went home that weekend and get a call maybe like the next day or the following day. And I knew if they were calling me that it was probably not a good thing, because at this point we were not as close as we are now. And I just wouldn't have been getting a call from them on the weekend. And so I got a call from them and they were like, I really need you to sit down because I have some news, but there's nothing about anything that you shared at all. Like there were other things.
So in the previous old staff situation, it did not get documented.
No, it did not get documented. There were like a few other things, but nothing that had anything to do with anything that I'd shared. And so I was obviously very frustrated, but the person that was helping me through this is a very like proactive, just like, let's just get things done, let's just figure it out kind of person. And so they were just like pretty immediately like, let's just go make a police report. We'll just kind of have to start from scratch. So we go and we make a police report probably within like that same week. So we go to the police station, and I was originally going to go to one police station, but I felt like I didn't want to go to that police station because I was aware that he's friends with a lot of law enforcement, and I knew specifically in this specific area. And so I was like, I don't really know that we want to go there. So we ended up going to one closer to where like the actual crime happened, like near my house. And when we went, I was already so nervous. I was like, I remember from that day I was like physically shaking. And we get into like this little room, and I had my like boss at the time they sat in the room with me, and I don't remember the series of events specifically, but I remember at some point an officer came in and like sits down to kind of take my report, and like my boss at the time introduces themselves, and then I start kind of sharing my story, and literally all I said was, yeah, so I'm here to, report a crime that happened like a few years ago. He was in Lynn Hills Church at the time. He was heavily involved in junior high school, young adult groups. And, I would like to report something that, some inappropriate behavior that happened. And before I could even like finish that last sentence, the officer cut me off and was like, hey, actually, so sorry, but I know exactly who you're talking about. I'd not even said his name. He's like, I know exactly who you're talking about, and I'm not going to be able to take your report because it would be like biased. I think that's what he said. It would be like biased. So I'm going to have to leave the room.
I'm rolling my eyes. If you're listening on the podcast, just need you to know that. Okay, keep going.
He was like, I'm going to have to leave the room, and I'm going to have to get a different officer, but they'll take your report. We'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. So at this point, I'm like, my head immediately, just already being an anxious person, my immediate thought was, this is not good. Like the fact that there's an officer here that knows, like, this is not good. And so I said that to my boss at the time that was sitting in the room with me, and they were like, no, it's fine. Like, I don't think it's gonna, like, I think it'll be fine. Like, don't worry about it. Like, And so the officer comes back in the room, the same officer that was there the first time, and is like, yeah, so at this point, he's confirmed his name with me, like the perpetrator's name, like confirmed his name with me, confirmed where I think relatively he was living at the time. He'd confirmed all this stuff with me. But then he comes in the room with his personal cell phone and shows me his cell phone and is like, is this the phone number that you have for your phone? And name in this person, like in the officer's phone, was like a nickname. Like they like are buddies.
They were like buddies, yeah.
And so I thought that was weird because I was like, you should be able to confirm in your like police, in my head, I'm thinking you should be able to confirm in your police system his phone number, address, all that kind of stuff with like ID. And so it was strange to me, like that, like immediate red flags. But I also had my boss there telling me like, it's fine, don't worry about it. Like, I also think she could tell I was really.
She was probably trying to calm you down.
Yeah, exactly. So and anyway, he has me confirm the phone number, and then he leaves the room, and then another officer does come in and like take my statement. At this point, we leave, and they're like, don't worry, it's going to make it to the reporter's desk. We'll reach out to you. And I think they said like a couple weeks. It's going to take a few weeks to process, but then we'll reach out to you. I never heard anything. And then my boss at the time, again, a very proactive person, kind of kept asking me about it. And I was like, haven't heard anything. And they also hadn't heard anything because they had their information too. And it kind of just fizzled. Like I called like a couple times and never really heard anything back. And my boss said that they called either like once or twice, but we like never heard anything back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to part 1. We'll be back soon in a couple weeks to wrap up the interview with Ari. And I hope you guys have a blessed week. Bye.